Hello, everyone, and welcome back to This Week in Enterprise Tech. Welcome to episode 60. Yes, I'm Hyoun Park from Amalgam Insights here with our guest host, Kenneth Gonzalez. How are you today?
I am doing well, thank you. And it's great to be back as guest hosting again. I'm just real looking forward. I think we've got some great stuff on the agenda.
All right, fantastic. And I'm energized because I'm ready to head off to RSA conference right after this. They are kicking off, of course, this mega conference of security solutions. And although I've never really been a security analyst per se, I have spent some time in mobile device management, endpoint security, and really the governance associated with IT ecosystems. So I'm really interested to see what they're saying about that. And of course, it's going to be all about AI, generative AI, agentic AI, every single buzzword you can say, and then
Yeah,
AI, and then security. So we'll see how that turns out.
I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun and very interesting.
Yeah. But getting back to the real world for a second, so we did have some announcements last week. There were a number of earnings calls and related CEO messaging that was pretty interesting to listen to. And we're going to start by talking about one of the companies we have covered probably most often at This Week in Enterprise Tech, ServiceNow. So obviously, when they did their earnings, Bill McDermott, tech superstar, came out to gave his opening remarks to the financial analyst audience in the earnings call. And one of the interesting things that you pointed out here, Ken, was about how ServiceNow was announcing CRM deals. Now, they'd been talking a little bit about entering the CRM market, but now they're talking about actually closing some deals here, which is a bit different from what we're used to hearing from ServiceNow as an ITSM and workflow company.
Yeah. Well, so having watched ServiceNow for a long time and talked with a lot of CIOs about the relatively high cost of the platform, its earnings announcement has a lot of good news in it for the company,
Mhm.
specifically looking at all the deals over $1 million dollars in annual contract value and subscription growth exceeding analyst expectations.
Mhm.
I would say that they're starting to get a lot of things right. Um, so, number one, focus on the platform, taking advantage of the common capabilities to build out vertically integrated offerings.
Mhm.
It's a very smart play. And I think that this harkens back to some of the things that they had done in earlier years, like the beginnings of the financial close application, where they're really focusing on what role is it that they're going to serve
Mhm.
and what are the required capabilities that they need to be making available. So staying close to the use case, I think that's really smart. And then targeting the key adjacencies that they want to expand into. They're able to go relatively deep because of the nature of the platform. And unlike what I would call like the Microsoft days of old, where you introduce something in a new area, but it's crippled,
Mhm.
it doesn't give you all of the capabilities because, well, you're still kind of sorting your way through how the area works and what capabilities are really required. Uh, they now have a leg up on being able to provide something which is actually a lot more robust because of the nature of the platform. So
Mhm.
it's not just the surface treatment of the application. And I also think that their experience around being able to offer developer capabilities to use the platform and service led experience is as a way of co-creating new capabilities. It's very, very smart and provides them with a really good set of proving grounds to go through, extract new ideas, and then turn those into products. So I'm predicting that this year at Knowledge is going to be a very interesting one.
Yeah, I one of the things that I've really loved about ServiceNow throughout the years is their consistency in having a single platform across all the capabilities that they provide. And
Yeah,
as basic as that sounds, and as much as every vendor says that they are a platform, it's actually really difficult to take the
yeah,
effort to re-platform acquisitions that and bring them onto a platform, sometimes taking a year or 2 years to fully launch new acquisitions
yeah.
again, because they have stayed very consistent about saying we are going to have a platform approach. Everything is going to work on the ServiceNow data platform. Everything is going to be serviceable with ServiceNow activities going forward, activities and workflows, no matter where you started, no matter what functionalities you wanted, you put into place, no matter which languages you originally
Yeah.
chose. And I've always been a big fan of ServiceNow for that. And now that they are at the multi-billion-dollar level, that rigor is really going to really be very useful to them. And now the sky's the limit, honestly. Even in these areas that they've started to dig into from an industry perspective, I feel like ServiceNow is really just in the beginning stages, the baby steps. Like in CRM, obviously, there's so much room for them in CRM, financial close or financial management. There's so much room for ServiceNow to exceed where they are right now. And really, for them, it's just a matter of being able to execute across all these industries and all these verticals.
And it's also interesting to note that from an engineering perspective, they've not been standing still since 2018.
Mm-hmm.
They've actually done a lot of under the covers engineering to make sure that what you consider a ServiceNow instance to be is a lot more efficient. It's a lot more scalable than it has been in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that they're justifiably seeing return on investment for a lot of the work that they've been doing.
Excellent. Yeah. And then the final thing I'd put out there is that we've talked a lot about over the years about the golden system of record or the system of truth. And ServiceNow has done a great job of also creating a kind of a dictionary, a catalog of workflows of truth or workflows of that are trusted at an enterprise level, and using that as a defining point for showing what an enterprise platform looks like. I think ServiceNow's ability to be able to not just talk about data, but about work and automation at a time when we are talking about the agentic, this next world of agentic stuff. To get to agentic stuff, you have to first have defined workflows and metadata and all of that ugly, boring stuff in the middle. And I think ServiceNow has done a good job of defining that, where everybody else just wants to say, magic metadata,
Yeah, exactly.
uh, great. So as long as we're talking about agentic AI and agents, another big announcement we saw this week was around agent creation and control from Dataiku. So Dataiku is a well-funded analytics and AI company. They have long been handling problems around data management, data workflows, competing against the likes of Alteryx, Informatica, SnapLogic, iPaaS companies, as well as application integration companies like Workato. So you kind of get the idea. These people are
Yeah.
deep into integration agents, but now they have this new capability that they announced last week in New York around their AI agents with Dataiku, where they want to be the third party to manage and orchestrate agents from a cost perspective, from an activity perspective, from a lineage perspective.
Well, I thought it was interesting that in the release there was a couple points that they made. So that over 20% of customers now use the product to integrate Gen AI into the business data workflows, with multiple projects exceeding 1,000 active use cases. Well, 20% seems like a lot, right? But
Mm-hmm.
what's the end here? That's the thing I was starting to get curious about, is exactly how big is that pool? And when they say that these applications deliver a combination of analytics models and agents that only they can deliver, well, to a certain extent, it kind of sounds a bit like puffery to me.
Mm-hmm.
So, what's your take on this?
Gosh, I think this is the tricky area because nobody has got agentic AI figured out. Right now, there are a bunch of
Yeah,
agentic silos, like we just talked about ServiceNow, which in and of itself, they would talk about how they do agent orchestration within the ServiceNow platform. So you can create all the agents you want within ServiceNow and then have them talk to each other and magically do all of your work. And, Salesforce would talk about this with Agentforce. SAP would talk about this with Joule. Everybody has their solution for agentic AI and how you're going to be able to orchestrate and automate work within their own platform. But when you want to go across these silos, there still isn't a great solution. A few weeks ago, we talked about how Google was bringing out agent to agent to start helping agentic silos talk together. But Google tends to work more around standards and individualized technical capabilities rather than to build, say, integration platforms. So I feel like Dataiku is at least taking a stance on how to make these agents work together, creating an agent mesh, what it means to govern these agents.
Mhm.
So I think that part is interesting. That in at a time when we are still trying to figure out how do we control these agents, Dataiku at least taking that next step to try to figure out what you're going to do once 10,000 people create 50,000 agents across all these different platforms.
Yeah, I don't want to make it seem as though I'm just tossing darts here, because
Mhm.
as you rightly point out, there are a lot of agentic tools, both currently in the marketplace and are going to be coming. So that means that there's going to be a lot of ways of stitching them together.
Mhm.
And the three questions that kind of stand out on my mind. So, what compelling set of capabilities does this represent to the adopting firm? Why is it better than a DIY approach given the state of the market?
Mhm.
And even if it's currently advantageous, will the price point be able to hold up over time? As an end user organization, are you willing to make the bet on them that this is the horse you're going to ride, because it may actually not turn out all that well? Now, I'm certainly not willing to discount any of their claims here, but I think it's worth a little extra due diligence on the part of the organizations as they're doing their vetting and building their forward-looking plans.
Yeah, and it's early days
Yeah.
from an agent management perspective. I fully expect that the likes of Informatica and Boomi and Alteryx, all of which have their shows, by the way, uh, I think around May 13th, 14th, 15th, they all picked that same time frame this year for their show. I'm betting all three of those will have some sort of agentic management solution that they are going to announce at the
Yeah.
show as well. This is quickly going to become a very crowded and confusing market where everybody's going to be defining agentic management in their own way.
Yeah.
So at the beginning of this year, we had no third party agentic management. And by June of this year, we're just going to be surrounded by it. For those of us who care about application and integration management and that boring IT kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that'll be an interesting thing to watch. Uh, and so, as we're thinking about integration, management, and technology investments, it's easy to get carried away and just think AI, AI, AI all the time. But we're actually also seeing that there's still the rest of IT isn't dead just yet. There's a recent study showing that banks and financial services organizations are still very much thinking about digital transformation, according to Broadridge Financial Solutions, a company that looked at over 500 banking and technology operations surveyed executives for its innovation report, and finding that they are still expecting to spend approximately 30% of their IT budgets on technology innovation and transformation over the next 2 years. And that means not just AI, but all of the standard digital transformation work that we tend to think about when we are trying to turn paper and manual processes into something a little more digital.
Yeah. In reading this, I was actually I couldn't help but thinking of this as being something overly optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
especially given current financial conditions. Because, if you would have asked me about this in January, I would have given two thumbs up. Today, a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
different situation. Because, would either a perspective or actual recession change this thinking? Are these changes inevitable, or with just some changes in resourcing, spend, and timing, and potentially the scope of them? I think that one of the themes I've been noticing is around kind of like the need for getting back to basics.
Mhm.
So rather than thinking of digital transformation like a new way of working, it's like, no, how do we take the rough edges out? How do we get rid of the things that are just adding mass but really not adding value? And if we
Yes.
start
Mhm.
using that lens as the basis for transformation, I think we're talking about something which is much more reasonable in time, money, and scope than it is about the, oh, wow, we can be this whole new type of thing when it really not called for right now.
Yeah, I think there's room on both sides. On the one hand, I've talked a lot about the IT rule of 30, saying that any unmanaged IT department or spend category, subcategory tends to have 30% in waste when it's left alone, just because there's all those duplicate instances, zero use accounts, all that kind of stuff that is always just kind of hanging out there. And any company where you've got 10 e-sign solutions and 30 project management
Yeah.
solutions probably has a little bit of waste that can be cut away.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Ken, as you pointed out, we definitely live in uncertain times right now. The rules are changing day to day, week to week from an economic and geopolitical perspective. And I would not be surprised to see that result in an increase in cybersecurity spend. I'm not just saying that because I'm going to RSA this week, but it just seems to me that even if no matter how you look at this, either America's fantastic, or we've got a lot of enemies, or some things have been broken, and that makes certain things easier to sneak into or break into. It just seems like there's going to be a lot more opportunity for the bad guys in cybersecurity to potentially grab data and money, and banks are going to be incentivized to spend to protect that.
Yeah. Without a
Mhm.
doubt.
Yeah. And I think that as we think about technology transformation, that just because we move to digital processes and capabilities, obviously that is going to provide more channels for potential attack. I'm not the expert on exactly what that means, but it would be hard for me to imagine that that would lead to fewer opportunities for the black hats to sneak in.
Yeah. Well, and I like the fact that like the Verizon data breach report that we've got on the agenda here.
Yep.
You know, you want to give a little context to set that one up, and then we'll.
Yeah. So, let's just go straight into that. One of the other reports that we saw that was really interesting was around Verizon bringing out its newest report on breaches and security. This is always a great report because they do a pretty comprehensive view of looking at data breaches throughout the years. And throughout the year, one of the most interesting trends that they brought up, it was front and center in their top takeaways, is that 30% of breaches were associated with third parties, your vendors, your software providers and platforms, and which doubled from the year before. So hackers are increasingly not just going after end users, but after the platforms themselves. Probably the most famous of these was the big Snowflake breach that happened, where it turns out that a lot of Snowflake customers were not turning on two-factor or multi-factor authentication in certain cases, and Snowflake was giving them the freedom to do so, and it ended up being really bad for everyone involved because although Snowflake has always been very popular for being easy to use and easy to start up and very easy to scale, perhaps in this case, they gave a little bit too much flexibility to the end user, and that has been fixed going forward. But everybody else is going to deal with this problem as well that we have been dealing with for the past decade. Security environment, an IT environment, really, where everything's supposed to get easier. There's an app for that. There's SaaS for that. The average enterprise has 1,000 apps and data sources at this point, and some have many more. Some have an order of magnitude more when you look at the data sources. And all of those are new vulnerabilities and potential access breaches that exist. And that's going to be a huge, huge problem to have to solve. So, Verizon took a look at some of those numbers, and it's really interesting. I definitely recommend taking a look at it.
Well, one of the numbers that they call out is, and I'll use the second half of the analysis here, that 46% of the uh, perimeter device vulnerabilities not being remediated.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I think this is just one of those things that's kind of like the pucker factor moment, where just the raw number of vulnerabilities that there are to remediate, and the second factor being the use of AI tools to generate payloads and applications that will exploit those existing vulnerabilities and increase the potential lethality of ransomware payloads. Uh, this is really important. And I believe that we are in a situation now where we really do need to intentionally shift from a reactive to a proactive orientation on this when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
security. I'm not a security person by nature, but I am close enough to it to realize that you can only go for so long, like pretending the risk does not exist. To we got to do something. We have to have more of an intentional strategy around how we're going to approach it than just, hey, did we patch? Not enough.
Yeah, and what I do know is that the perimeter is getting more and more varied. We are all dealing with more devices. Now we've got cameras. Now we've got AI being able to independently
Yes.
do all sorts of different things. We just spent a few minutes talking about agentic capabilities from a variety of directions, and those are going to potentially be either access or data driven or analytic issues as well that
Yes.
affect these vulnerabilities, this vulnerability profile that every enterprise has. Yeah, this is getting tough, really, really tough. I do not envy at all the security profession at this point, as even if they do their jobs perfectly based on definitions from 5 years ago, they can still get really screwed over, or businesses can get screwed over while security says we did the best we could with the meager budget that you gave us.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Oh, so thank you to Verizon. Please check out that 2025 data breach investigation report.
Yeah.
Uh, and there are other macro issues that are happening in the tech world as we're thinking about AI. We talked a few weeks ago about Microsoft looking like they were cutting their CapEx commitments, and now we're seeing Amazon is pulling back on CapEx investments in servers as well, as they are starting to realize that the commitments that they made may have been a little overblown. And I've heard we've got tariffs as well that may be making making that decision a little difficult as well. So what do you think about the capex spend decisions that are starting to be announced by the big AI players?
Well, that specific article, I had this thing come into my head is like, the a new alternative title for that is Big Blue Now Seeing Red.
Yes.
And I think that there's two things that we want to. I'll take this from two sides. So the first side
Okay.
is from the government customer's perspective. I think that this is a good time with all of the budget uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen. Uh, it really is time to focus on fundamentals, get back to
Yep.
basics. Think about the core capabilities that you need in order to meet the organization mission, and then expand the spend for anything you have above and beyond that, where it's easy to demonstrate that you're delivering customer or end user value that, makes the experience better, more predictable, able to actually fulfill on what you're on the hook for. And from a provider and tech firm's perspective, I think that there's two things I would primarily recommend is
Mhm.
lead with products that are going to give customers good blocking and tackling capabilities at attractive prices, even if that's a bit of a loss leader. And then being able to look at what are your cross sells and upsells that translate into an enhanced customer value or an enhanced customer experience where they can now easily justify that spend. It probably is not a way to be, rolling in dough, but it's a good way to kind of ensure that there's a predictable level of growth and not straining either your budget or artificially constraining what you can actually get into the marketplace and have be successful.
Yes, I feel like the work that has been done with AI specifically, there's been a lot of experimentation going on, and not necessarily a lot of focus on how these agents, how these generative capabilities, how all this data center and computing commitment actually leads to business value and
Yeah.
outcomes at the end of the day. There's a lot missing in that mapping. And I think this is, we are definitely at a time right now where blocking and tackling matters, where we are trying to figure out at the end of the day, how does this technology investment lead to better either sales or marketing or budgeting
Right.
or purchasing or operational value or manufacturing, or help us to track the incipient supply chain issues that we are about to face as shipping and tariffs come into play. We know they're going to happen. We know there's going to be some rapid changes, and this is not the time to have ocean liner type monolithic technologies that can't shift quickly enough to
Yeah,
meet business needs. Mhm.
I'm with you there.
Yeah. So it's interesting that I feel like with at the hyperscaler level, the likes of Microsoft and Amazon are really trying to figure out how much money are we supposed to spend. We know it's going to be billions of dollars in computing, but we don't necessarily know how much. We want to say that it's enough that the market will be confident that AI demand is there, but we can't actually bankrupt ourselves to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, to your point, we're really early days in seeing the actual impacts and the true costs of the self-inflicted gunshot wound that
Mhm.
the tariff wars have represented. And how it's going to play out, I don't think is going to bode well for any of us. Um, I think we're far from a cap on seeing on the spend on AI because of continued innovation. Even if that is not like, oh my God, it's the growth is massive. We're still going to see a lot of it. Why? Well, vertical and company specific models, not
Mhm.
necessarily like the base LLM, but really there's lots of work to be done for the verticals. Raw storage requirements. I'd like to think about this in terms of people have been talking about data lakes. No, think about like a data ocean.
Mhm.
There's a lot of data out there that we might need to be considering as we develop these new specific models. And then there's all of the conditioning that goes along with taking that ocean and now cleansing that data, doing the extract, transform, and load so that it now is usable on one of your platforms to either do your analytics or drive your new AI behaviors or the agentic things that we want to be able to do. And then let's expand that out a little bit farther and say that we might even be redrawing the boundaries on what we consider edge computing and edge
Mhm.
technologies. So this has got a lot of room to run, but it's going to take time to have that all play out. We are going to use that capacity. How quickly, how fully, those are environmental variables we're going to see. I think that the investment required on the part of the hyperscaler, the exact level of performance that the customer is going to expect, and then comparing that to the yield is going to be like the calculus that needs to be thought about when we consider exactly what they're going to invest and what that means to the consumer. It's
Mhm.
anything but a done deal.
Yeah. And I find that concept of the data ocean really interesting. So I'm a bit of an aquarium nerd. I used to live in Boston, where the New England Aquarium is, and now I'm a member of the Monterey Bay Aquarium here in California. Like I really like, seawater and fish and all that. But part of the interesting about an ocean, we don't really think about the ocean very much, but it covers 70% of the planet, and
Yeah.
there are a wide array of ecosystems within the ocean. So what you see at the beach is very different from what you see 20 or 30,000 feet underwater. And all of these different ecosystems now have to be built out. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's a very apt comparison to what we're seeing from the data side where we have everything from ephemeral time, streaming data that where you go from stream to decision in milliseconds, all the way to the deep archived stuff that you may
Yeah.
never touch again, but want to keep as a trade secret or may want to hide under lock and key for whatever reason. So all these different things, and
Yeah.
right now it's just kind of dumped into what we call the lake.
Yeah.
Yeah, without really knowing what to do with a lot of it. But we're going to have to make a lot more of those nuanced decisions, and hopefully AI can help us a little bit with that. Yes. No, I also just wanted to quickly dig into. So we talked about tariffs a little bit already, but the fact that IBM is has been, if you look at their stock price over the past couple of years, it's almost doubled. Like they've actually been doing a fantastic job of executing from a pure business perspective, and I feel like from a relevance perspective, we both are seeing the IBM mainframe being fairly successful, as well as the impact that Red Hat has had on IBM. Those are hard to ignore as success factors for IBM's capabilities. But it does seem like they're being dinged pretty hard based on not renewing some U.S. government contracts, which is interesting to me because for such a long time in software, I feel like when we take briefings, vendors love talking about how they want government contracts, treating them almost like gold, like an ongoing asset that could never be taken away and is going to help both their bottom line and their ability to support governance and new capabilities that they can bring back to the rest of the enterprise world. But this makes it look a little more like those government contracts are a little less of a sure thing right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I think watching the pendulum shift from one extreme to another um, should give all of us pause,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because there are ripple effects that go along with that shift in funding. Because you have large shifts that go towards the provider, and well, and what does the provider do? The provider provides jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Those jobs end up with people getting paid. They put money into the local economy, into the national economy. There's a whole lot of stuff connected to this that at some point we might find is, this was not necessarily the great deal that we expected it was going to be. So I'm expecting that, especially as when the full effect of the lack of services or the degradation in service starts to become apparent, um, that's going to correct. But that's going to take some time to show itself. And I don't think that being able to just write it off as though, well, we shouldn't be paying attention to that anymore. That would be a very naive view. It's going to
Mm-hmm.
come back in some form or fashion. And now the provider is just going to have to be a little bit more attuned to what current market conditions are and what the effect of the government contracts are actually going to contribute to the bottom line.
Sure. That totally makes sense. And I think that as the government is, the challenge with software is that the better you make it, the longer it takes to fall apart. So sometimes you can neglect something and for 6 months, 12 months, and think that you have dodged a bullet when really you just are ignoring the potential issues that are coming into about to come up.
Yeah. And I
Mhm.
also think another area that we've traditionally underinvested in is looking at all of the effects of legacy technology, legacy process, and trimming that away. I
Mhm.
think that's one area that we can focus on that will provide both a benefit to the provider as well as to the government organization. The refactoring and getting rid of the tech debt.
Yes, I'm. I did think that's definitely an opportunity. It's a little frustrating that I know that we've recently basically gotten rid of our digital transformation capabilities in the U.S. government over the past couple of months in the name of cost cutting. Perhaps not the wisest long-term move, but be that as it may, it has happened. So now we get to deal with it.
Exactly.
um, on that bright note, I'm gonna move on to uh, looking at AI at a broader level. Well, we're going to look at a couple of stories about more the cultural side of AI and how this might be affecting us. An interesting note on X, we saw OpenAI's CEO, Sam Altman, state that basically they were spending tens of millions of dollars in from people who are saying please and thank you on ChatGPT. The concept here being that as you are more polite to ChatGPT and other generative AI solutions, that they will actually think longer and harder or give you more complete answers because it reflects how the training data that they have been taught. Where honestly, if you ask a question in real life or on an online forum and you say, please and thank you, or could you please explain this in greater detail to me? Thank you very much. You're more likely to get a good answer than if you just say, tell me the answer to a random group of people. So it makes sense that these please and thank yous have been internalized by the model. But I also find it slightly heartening that AI might be rewarding good manners at a time when we don't always have that type of reinforcement on a cultural and social basis.
Yeah. I mean, I won't dispute the claim that there is a cost to handling the additional tokens, but I will argue that those are important cues that you want to see in the prompts.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because you're getting clues about what the user's attitude is towards the subject and potentially the actual AI technology itself.
Mm-hmm.
And while it may represent a little bit of anthropomorphism on the user's part, but if it were truly neutral, why would the responses from the LLM have a like and dislike button?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on. Seriously. You're trying to get some clue about whether what you provided back was hitting the mark or not.
Yeah.
So this is a way of actually getting that input without having to ask you to push another button, take another action. It's implicit in being able to be part of the conversation. So if you can learn that from the interaction, that's really a great thing. Now, on Beavers in his article that you're going to include with that, I generally
Yes.
agree with his observations, and I really like the point that he closes off with that you referenced, which is it's good practice for interacting with humans.
Yes.
I think that is just so important for us because in today's social media world, it's really easy to see how people can hide behind the supposed anonymity of being some sort of avatar that's disconnected from you personally, where you can say whatever you want without consequence or any kind of being held accountable for it. And people are a lot meaner. I,
Mm-hmm.
things you would say to somebody in social media, you would never say if they were sitting right in front of you and you were having a conversation. I
Right.
think that anything that kind of returns us to our humanity and the ability to interact meaningful with each other and not be short or really mean is probably a good thing. So I like seeing this. And
Yeah, that
you-
yeah, that comment by Microsoft product manager Curtis Beavers was definitely spot on about how being polite is probably a good way to work with people and everything in general.
yeah,
But there's definitely this challenge that we've had from AI and with social media that uh, some of us think of these as tools to communicate with each other face to face, and we use norms and means to speak with each other. Some of us think of these systems as command and control demands, and that's how they or we, some of us collectively, speak to these systems, even if there is something on the other side that would theoretically reward politeness or humanity. Some of us have been trained not to use that humanity in speaking with these systems or speaking to actual people who are on the other side of the system. And that's definitely a challenge from a social perspective, and
yeah.
it leads to expectations that perhaps culture or society can sometimes feel broken at times and lead us to more pessimistic approaches. And with that, I'm going to lead into our last story of the day, which is a little bit more of a big picture perspective, but uh, with a tech side to it as well. In that recruitment vendor Indeed, which we all know, Indeed.com, job posting,
Mhm.
stuff like that,
Yeah.
they did a survey that showed that, among other things, 51% of Gen Z thinks their college degree is a waste of money because the world's more complex, AI, all these things that make them think that what they did during their years of college is not useful to them from a working perspective. So I know you looked at this, both the article and the study as well, and I'm curious what you thought of it.
Well, I actually think that there's a lot of goodness to be found in here. So for a period of time, I actually worked in the computer science department on faculty as at Cal State Fullerton,
Mm-hmm.
and I just can recall back to then there was definitely more of a focus on what I would call job related skills, because there was a time when it was in fashion to be having your like first college experience be more along the lines of liberal arts. Why? Because it fostered a balanced worldview that enabled appreciation of the arts and the sciences, study of history and its connection to modern events. And
Mm-hmm.
college curricula have generally steadily narrowed their focus to be more um, like an employment prep or job skills program.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we've lost something as part of that. And I think that the Gen Z comment really goes into kind of like seeing the reality of, well, I did all this schoolwork and am I seeing the benefit in the workplace? Not not a whole lot. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of companies are dropping their requirement for having college degrees. So I think that there's really something in here to pay attention to. And when you consider the cost of education over time, like back in the 70s, like where you live in California,
Mm-hmm.
it used to be where you could actually go to a UC or a Cal State school and have a full-on 4-year degree and have spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 for it.
Mm-hmm.
And compared to what the ability to earn was, you're not looking at something which was like this huge mountain of debt, like what we're seeing today, where people are going through and potentially three, four, five times the amount of spend for what's probably not as good an education,
Mm-hmm.
in uh, just raw dollars from period to period. So, with
Yeah.
current economic conditions, the mass layoffs that we're seeing in tech, and I think that math is going to get a lot worse before it gets better. So, I think it's a really good time for us to be thinking about what the value and the cost of education is and the role of education here in the US. Because if we don't do something that actually causes that change, especially with like the pulling out the infrastructure around the Department of Education and how funding goes from the federal government down to the states and localities. Uh, this could have some significant consequences where we not only show a decrease in leadership, but we actually lose our ability to be a world leader.
Yeah. And I think there's a real confusion about what the college degree is supposed to represent. Once upon a time, it was basically the ticket to call it a white collar lifestyle,
Yeah.
or it was more of a job guarantee. And I don't think it really is anymore. That's part of the problem, that it is sold as a guarantee for something that it's not. I think about my own tech experience. So I graduated with a liberal arts degree in women's and gender studies, of all things. I loved it. It was really interesting in finding out how people lived in different ways around the world. And it's been really useful for my managerial career, actually. But obviously, I didn't learn much about tech in there. And I learned most of my tech in my first 5 years on the job. It
Yeah,
was
right.
stuff that I could have learned probably in a community college, or a good technical, maybe even a technical high school, who knows, like the stuff. I feel like the stuff I learned about, say, with data structures and database management, it's useful, and it was not necessarily basic at elementary school stuff, but it didn't necessarily need a 4-year college to learn this stuff either. I think we need to find some sort of balance there on the technical skills that are necessary to work. But we also need to tell college students or potential college students that the college degree and experience is not just about taking the classes and getting the degree, but also who you're able to network with. That a lot of these professors are world-class experts in what they do. And if you're not talking to them outside of class hours, you're the one missing out. There are these research opportunities that exist at the school. All of these, there's different cultural experiences that come into play when you go to, say, a state university or a decently sized school, even just like music, art, all of these things, that's part of the college experience as well. And if you're just skipping all that and simply saying, I'm going to take my 4 classes per semester and I'm going to get out of here with my whatever 3.5 GPA and expecting to get a job, like that doesn't quite cut it either, because that's kind of cheating yourself out of
Yeah.
the ongoing college experience that actually lives with you for 40 years. The class, individual classes, they kind of come and go. A lot of that's faded from our brains at this point. But there's an experience of going to college that is at that, where some little bit, you can't, it's different for each person, does stay with you, as you get older.
Yeah, and I don't want to discount the jobs training portion of it, because while I was at Fullerton, I was also a member of the advisory board for the extended education program, and that
Mhm.
was a perfect place to have vocationally focused training, where we had programs in client server programming languages. There lots of
Nice.
interesting stuff that was really geared towards what are the needs of the employers, so that you could actually bring somebody in, give them something valuable, which has a nice connection between what the core mission of the computer science department is and what the employer's needs are. So you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, now I need to fully rewrite the curricula to be able now to offer the degree in that. No, it could change and flex as market needs change and evolve. So you're actually now doing both a public service as well as having something which represents an enhanced revenue stream for the university to be able to fund other things. So I think if we step back for a moment and think about the bigger picture around what the role of education is and who we're targeting, that gives us a little opportunity to be more creative about it instead of this path that it's gone down.
Yeah. And on that note, kengon has fixed higher education, so I hope everybody's listening. I hope all the schools out there start refiguring out their curriculum to stop just ripping off students and prepare them for the real world a little bit more in a more economically and financially sustainable way, while still maintaining the mission of higher education. Get to it.
Yes, love it.
Yes. And on that note, it's been another great week in enterprise tech. Thank you so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, comment, and let us know what you're looking for next week. Ken, thank you so much for joining us this week and last week. It has been a joy to have you here as a guest host. And we also look forward to seeing Charlie back next week.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure, and I've really enjoyed being a seat warmer for Charlie. And I'll continue to be a viewer and encourage you guys and be right there with you.
All right. Thanks so much. And on that note, see you soon.
Bye.